Every so often, we're given an antagonist so overwhelmingly powerful that there seems to be no way for anyone to stand up to him. My Hero Academia gave us one such character, All for One. His name is not only based on his quirk, but also perfectly encapsulates his personality, as you'll see during this video. He provides the perfect foil for the protagonist of the show, Izuku Midoriya. Izuku is born quirkless but gathers true allies around him and achieves power great enough to challenge the greatest villain to ever exist. Juxtaposed against this is All for One, who has countless quirks and allies, but all of them have either been manipulated or are there for their own benefit. It's an extremely well-crafted dynamic that helps in the character development of both characters. The importance of a well-written villain who fits into the universe they're in cannot be emphasized enough. Without a villain's presence, a hero's value is significantly diminished. In this video, we'll explore the character of All for One in great detail, so that by the end, you'll have a much better understanding of the primary antagonist of My Hero Academia. So, without further delay, let's get right into it. Who is All for One? His bloody origin story. All for One is the primary overarching antagonist of the My Hero Academia series. As his self-proclaimed name suggests, he's the antithesis of all those who possess the quirk or power called One for All. He's the creator of the League of Villains and has been controlling the government from the shadows for over a century. He's also the first person to take up his quirk's name as his own. The actual first name of All for One is unknown, and we only know that his family name is Shigaraki. He was born to a female prostitute of unknown origin along with his brother, Yoichi Shigaraki. We're not given much information about his mother other than the fact that she had an abnormal growth on her body resembling a bone-like tumor while she was pregnant with the twins. All for One's mother dies presumably while giving birth to her children and is seen next to a river alongside her two newborn babies. As the rats gather, waiting to feast on the dead woman and her babies, All for One and Yoichi are swept away due to a sudden flood in the area. It's important to note that the tumor on their mother's dead body had vanished, an early telltale sign of Shigaraki's powers. We're also given the terrifying imagery of All for One as an infant gnawing at his dead mother's breast while holding the hand of his twin. We're informed that the reason for their mother's weakness and swift demise was due to the two babies draining her of her life force. Due to All for One stealing the majority of the nutrition in his mother's womb, he was born strong, unlike his frail and supposedly quirkless brother, Yoichi. About a year after their birth, a baby was born in Qingqing, China, referred to as the luminescent baby. They'd be registered as the first human with a quirk. Soon, the appearance of quirks would become widespread among babies and teenagers, leading to a huge increase in the population of metahumans. This would in turn throw the world into chaos, with the world being plunged into a conflict between the quirk wielders and regular humans. It is during this period that an anti-meta extremist group is walking down a destroyed street when they come across a child clothed in a plastic sheet. Showing disdain for the child, saying that they didn't wish to get infected by a meta orphan, they walk on by. Seconds later, they're skewered in horrifying fashion by bone-like spikes protruding from the child's body. This is revealed to be the first quirk that One for All stole from his mother, hence the reason behind its disappearance from her body. This could also hint at the fact that he and his siblings are, in fact, the children of the mother of all quirks. Regardless, their powers have been around since the dawn of the quirk era. The scene then skips a few years forward, and we find out that All for One's psychotic tendencies have started to blossom even further. He regularly brutalizes his younger brother, but keeps him around and leaves him alive because he views him as his possession. The villain holds what the author describes as an incredible amount of hubris within him ever since his birth. He held all living creatures in contempt, especially if they were of no use to him. One day, when All for One finds Yoichi reading a comic book, he tells his brother that someday he too would like to become like one of the shining heroes in the comic book. This would have a profound impact on All for One, but for all the wrong reasons. It should be noted that Yoichi still believes there's some good in his brother despite his wicked ways. He believes that All for One, in his own twisted way, still cares about him. Skipping ahead a few more years, All for One is seen in front of Yoichi talking about the luminescent baby who had been registered as the first quirk user to come into existence. He informs Yoichi that the luminescent baby had used his clout to amass a vast fortune and a large number of followers, due to which he had greatly benefited. He then goes on to inform Yoichi that he had in fact killed the luminescent baby and stolen his powers because he felt he didn't deserve all that adulation, as there had been quirk users born before him. Just like in the comics, how the hero used his secret identity and worked for the good of all versus the villain villain who ruled through terror, taking everything for himself, he too was inspired to be like the latter. He wanted to create a world where everything existed for his purpose and he was the center of all things. Just like how Yoichi wanted to be a shining hero, One For All claimed he wanted to become a demon lord. In his pursuit of becoming the symbol of evil, he wouldn't even spare his own brother. He murders him when he finds out that despite him having given Yoichi a quirk to win him over, his brother had chosen to escape. However, it wasn't until much later that he realized that by giving his supposedly quirkless brother a quirk, he had created the one quirk whose wielders would defy him for generations, the One For All. Despite this, he would go on to rule the country from the shadows like a master puppeteer in the century following his birth. This was the origin of One For All before he achieved his goal of becoming the symbol of evil. What is the personality of All For One? All For One is presented for most of the series as the embodiment of evil incarnate as the villain of My Hero Academia. He's a cold and calculating man prone to manipulating people for his own benefit. He holds all living creatures in contempt and only gets close to people in order to use them for his own ends. Once they've served their purpose or proven to be useless, he discards them without a single thought. Despite his manipulative and egomaniacal nature, he maintains an almost amicable and understanding demeanor in front of the people who serve his purpose. He even went so far as to appear as a doting mentor and father figure to Tomura while he groomed him to become his vessel. This is, however, just an act he puts up to maintain the loyalty of his subordinates. He is a completely self-absorbed and selfish human being who will go to any lengths to maintain his power. It is made quite clear, especially when we're given his origin story, that he lacks any sort of empathy, though he's very good at faking it. He's presented to us almost as a demon baby, with that image of him suckling on his dead mother's breast. All For One has no problem taking lives ever since he was a child. It shows that people are nothing but a means to an end for him. This could be due to him growing up during a time of conflict when his kind was persecuted, but the author hints that he's evil incarnate from birth. Due to how powerful he is, he has a calm and condescending air around him. He hardly ever loses his cool, even when faced with defeat, as he claims to have multiple contingency plans already in place. Thanks to his superior intellect and long-lived life, he managed to rule Japan from the shadows with most people unaware of his very existence. He maintains this image of himself for a large part of the series. It's only at the moment of his demise that we're introduced to his vulnerable side. This was caused by a rapid mental breakdown due to his beliefs being shattered, resulting in his confidence breaking after getting thoroughly beaten up by our protagonists. As the vestige of Yoichi begins to disappear in the end, All For One begs his brother not to leave him, even claiming he'll give up his pursuit of One For All. He also professes his love for his brother, claiming he's nothing without him. It's a powerful moment as we see that the villain, who was presented to us as this psychotic megalomaniac, self-centered individual full of hubris and superiority complex, was nothing more than a lonely man. One For All's physical appearance. As a young man, before his initial clash with All Might, All For One is seen as a good-looking man. He has white hair, red eyes, and a fair skin complexion. Blessed with a solid and muscular body, he towers at a height of around 7'4". Despite his imposing physique, it's his hands that are the biggest threat. The palms of his hands, to be more precise. This is because on the palm of his hands are two holes that are essential for his frightening quirk. With these two holes, he can steal anyone's quirk and distribute it to others if he so wishes. The initial clash with All Might drastically changed his appearance. He sustained devastating injuries to his body, with his face being disfigured beyond recognition. Ever since sustaining these injuries, he often appears with a mask over his head. The mask contains life support systems such as a breathing apparatus. The design of this mask changes over the course of the show, but the function remains the same. The design for his first mask resembles a navy blue skull with angular tubes on top of it. There's no visor, and it extends all the way to the throat and neck with more tubes running along it. It seems to serve the function of a mask, life support system, and armor all at the same time. The second design is much more minimalist and sleek while still resembling a skull. It seems to be an upgraded version of the old design. Unlike most of the characters in My Hero Academia, All For One has no actual costume per se. He is instead seen chiefly wearing a business suit paired with a formal shirt without a tie. He does change the shirt to a patterned one down the line. Beneath the mask, however, lies the devastated visage of All For One. Despite retaining his physical stature to a degree, his face is completely unrecognizable from what it was prior to his first battle with All Might. He has no hair, and his hair is mostly comprised of scar tissue. His face is a featureless mess with no visible nose, ears, and eyes. Only the outlines of his eye sockets are visible, and it goes without saying that he's blind. He does have a mouth, which is the only way he's able to draw breath, and why he also needs to wear the mask. Towards the end, he uses a drug that restores his appearance, and we get to see him aging in reverse as the battle rages on. Eventually, he regresses in age to the point that he unalives himself. Can All For One steal any quirk, or are there limitations? Even though it would appear that All For One is capable of stealing the quirks of any villain or hero out there, this certainly isn't the case. There are a few notable exceptions to the rule, along with certain conditions that need to be fulfilled for him to steal quirks. First of all, he is ironically incapable of stealing the one quirk he created, the One For All. Although no clear explanation is given as to why this is, there is a plausible theory. One For All was the result of an accidental combination of two quirks, one which stockpiles powers, and the other, a quirk that can only be transferred by the will of its owner. Even though All For One's ability is to steal, it somehow reacts badly against his brother's quirk, as One For All can only be freely given. Hence, if the current wielder of One For All doesn't wish the powers of the quirk to be transferred, it just won't. However, there are ways to work around this and make the user give up the One For All via things like manipulation caused by hypnosis, mind control, and blackmail. This, however, still doesn't change the fact that the quirk has to be given up out of their own free will, and is therefore perhaps the only quirk that is theft-proof. All For One can steal any quirk other than the One For All, but there is a limit to the quantity he can steal. This is due to the damage he sustained during his fight against All Might. Harboring too many stolen quirks can put enormous strain on his damaged body. He also cannot properly sustain the quirks he steals from the new generation, and this was one of the main reasons he sought out Dr. Kyudai Garaki's research. One of the conditions that needed to be fulfilled for All For One to be able to steal the quirks of his adversaries is he has to physically touch them with his hands. Just simply touching the effects of the quirk isn't enough. He also doesn't like to take quirks that require years of practice to perfect. Instead, he prefers the ones with which he can have an instant impact. This is more out of his own choice than his inability to absorb those quirks. He is also limited in the number of quirks he can possess at a time because he has transferred his original quirk to Tomura. He has a copy of the All For One made for him by Dr. Garaki. What are all the quirks that All For One possesses? Having been alive for close to 100 years, All For One has had plenty of time to amass his vast arsenal of quirks. In the series, he's seen using an enormous number of quirks with a wide range of effects. Though the origins of these stolen quirks aren't always known, it's plenty clear that most of them have been attained against their original users' wishes. Throughout his history, All For One has probably had way more quirks than we see him display during the course of the series. He's already a physically imposing human who, when augmented by quirks, gains superhuman durability, strength, speed, and senses. All For One is seen being able to go toe-to-toe with All Might in terms of his strength while being able to endure even the United States of Smash, All Might's ultimate move. Despite his lack of vision, his quirks grant him superhuman senses. Combined with his genius-level intellect, he's a force that not many can reckon with. All For One. Although he has numerous stolen quirks, this is the original quirk of our antagonist. This is the ability that grants All For One the power to steal someone else's quirk, leaving them quirkless. It also grants him the ability to bestow any quirk he possesses to someone of his choosing. There's a hole in the palm of each hand that facilitates this. Currently, he possesses a duplicate version of this quirk, with the original being duplicated by Dr. Kyudai and given to Tomura Shigaraki. Bone Spear. He has the ability to produce spears made of bone-like material. They can be created from any part of the body. This was the first quirk he ever stole, originally belonging to his mother. Search! With this quirk, no one has remained hidden from our villain for long. He can observe, monitor, and find the locations of individuals and groups. Not only this, he can also search for the weak points of any adversary. This quirk was stolen from a character called the Ragdoll. Air Cannon. This quirk allows One For All to create shockwaves in the air. This ability is usually used in conjunction with other quirks to enhance its effects further. Spring-like limbs. This quirk lets All For One give his limbs the qualities of a spring. Typically, this quirk is used to enhance the force of a blow, absorb shock, and enhance the power of moves like the air cannon. The origin of this quirk is unknown. Warping. This ability grants him the power to create multiple portals with the aid of a black liquid he produces. He can create multiple portals but can only warp things to and from his location. It has a limited range and can only work if used on someone with whom he has a close connection. We don't yet know the maximum number of portals he can open simultaneously. In the series, he's mostly seen warping Nomus into the League of Villains hideout and all the members of the Paranormal Liberation to the final battle. Impure Beam. As the name suggests, this is a quirk that grants All For One a beam attack. With this, he can unleash a powerful energy beam that, when further enhanced by his augmentation quirks, becomes one of his most devastating powers. It can cause incredible destruction and even damage to some of the strongest heroes. In fact, the power of the beam is so strong that it damages All For One even when he fires it. Rivet Stab. Due to this quirk, black tendrils with red highlights can emerge from almost anywhere on his body, although mainly from his fingers. All for One can use these tendrils to stab his foes as they can penetrate flesh easily. However, it's seen that it's up to him whether the Rivet Stab causes damage to his opponents or not, even if they're pierced. He normally combines it with the Forced Quirk activation against opponents who are at a distance. Forced Quirk Activation. This is a quirk that grants All for One the power to activate someone's quirk without their consent. He is also able to use it on himself. It works even if the target is conscious, unconscious, or paralyzed, and has a 100% success rate. He has to, however, know what the quirk he is forcefully activating does before using it. Impact Recoil. Thanks to this quirk, All for One can reverse the damage he takes from the impact of a physical attack back onto the attacker, leaving him unscathed. This ability does have a few limitations, however. He cannot reflect non-physical attacks, and their effects do not seem to be absolute. This is inferred from the fact that All for One usually uses this ability in conjunction with warping to bring others in between himself and the attacker to act as meat shields. Infrared. This is a quirk that grants All for One infrared senses, allowing him to navigate his environment through its use. This quirk has been constantly active ever since he lost his vision, and it works as a substitute. He can sense the emotional state of others to a degree. Its weakness, however, lies in its range being somewhat limited, and since it relies on infrared, his senses can be disrupted. Hard Flame Fan. All for One is able to generate fire, which he can then use to create a wall or several walls to be used as a barrier or defense. He can also envelop certain sections of his body with the flame to be used as armor. Its major flaw, however, lies in the fact that any flame that's more powerful can easily penetrate it, for instance, Endeavor's Hell Flame. Shunpatsu Ryoku. This quirk drastically increases the kinetic energy that All for One creates and releases, dramatically augmenting his speed and the impact of his blows. To make things even more crazy, he is said to possess 4 copies of this quirk, meaning its effect is multiplied 4 times. Hidaika. Hidaika, also known as hypertrophy, allows its user to increase the muscle hypertrophy in their arm. In other words, All for One can increase the size of his arms exponentially. He can use this quirk with a combination of other quirks to devastating effect. He also uses this ability when he restrains Hood, one of the 12 intelligent and high-end Nomu created by Dr. Kyudai Garaki. Blood Curdle. This quirk allows its user to paralyze opponents whose blood they ingest. It doesn't matter where and how the blood is found, as long as the quirk user can ingest it, and the effects are guaranteed. The max duration of this paralysis is 8 minutes, beyond which the target is no longer paralyzed. The duration of this paralysis within those 8 minutes can again vary depending on the victim's blood type. The quirk originally belonged to Chizome Akaguro, aka the hero killer Stain. It was stolen by All for One when he defeated and killed Stain during the final war. Its biggest weakness would be someone with the antigen swap. It would help massively reduce the effects of Blood Curdle by changing its user's blood type. Bloodlet. This quirk allows the user to expel all their blood from their body momentarily and then draw it back in. It is yet another counter for the Blood Curdle quirk and is used alongside the antigen swap by All for One to defeat Stain. Ryoryoku Zokyo. Also known as the Brawn Boost, this is a quirk that significantly upgrades the physical prowess of its wielder. All for One has 3 copies of this quirk within him, which has increased his strength to an overwhelming degree. Dark Ball. With this quirk, All for One is able to unleash a barrage of dark energy balls capable of destroying almost anything they come in contact with. It's unclear what the energy balls are made of, with speculation suggesting it's dark energy matter. Zoshoku, also known as the Multiplier quirk, this one allows All for One to grow multiple limbs, but it's unclear whom he stole this one from. Radio Waves. This quirk lets All for One emit electromagnetic pulses that can disrupt electronics, causing them to malfunction. You can also use this as a means of communication. It can be further used to activate and control Nomu. Fierce Wings. Originally belonging to Keigo Takami, also known as Hawks, this quirk was stolen by All for One during the final war. Fierce Wings grants its wielder 2 large wings with red feathers. The wings grant the user super speed and maneuverability. The feathers can also individually be controlled via telekinesis and are capable of performing a wide variety of actions. The feathers can be used to carry heavy objects and are strong enough to lift and move around a human being. They can also be used to slash the user's enemies. Lastly, the feathers also function as an extension of the user's senses, as they can detect objects and people by feeling the vibrations they emit. The wings can heal themselves but require close to 48 hours to do so. They can also be heavily damaged by fire. Plus, if too many feathers are missing from the wings, they predictably are worse at flying. Life Force. After Dr. Kyudai Garaki successfully managed to duplicate the quirk called Life Force, he gave the original to All for One and kept the duplicate for himself. This grants the users an extended lifespan and causes them to age extremely slowly, making All for One and Kyudai look much younger. The quirk has the significant drawback of affecting the wielder's mobility. However, All for One can easily circumvent this shortcoming through the various other quirks in his possession. What are some of the other unnamed quirks of All for One? Besides the quirks we just mentioned, there are a few more that All for One possesses. The ones we spoke about earlier were quirks with names mentioned directly in the series. These next set of quirks are seen being used by All for One, but not many details are given about them, including their names. Luminescence! This quirk allows All for One to glow with light. He stole it from the luminescent baby after he killed him. Shapeshifting. All for One has the ability to transform himself into another person. He uses this quirk while observing Tenko Shimura, who would later become his protege, Tomura Shigaraki. Telekinesis. We're shown that All for One can make objects levitate, as seen after he escapes from Tartarus. This means he has a quirk capable of granting him telekinesis. Lie detection. During his long life, this quirk has helped All for One weed out traitors from his band of followers. He can sense negative emotions towards himself and detect deceit using this ability. Spatial distortion. This quirk allows All for One to manipulate space within a range to devastating effect. It is this ability he uses to murder his brother Yoichi. He is also seen using this ability on Keigo Takami, but it turns out to be only an illusion. Black lightning. All for One is able to shoot black lightning from his body. He uses a powerful ability in conjunction with another quirk that allows him to grow appendages in the shape of a wing on his back. Mind control. And if all that wasn't enough, All for One is also shown being able to control the actions of others by placing his hand on their head. He does this during his escape from Tartarus by controlling the pilot of an emergency plane. Besides these, All for One has gathered countless other quirks without a name. In his century-long life, he's absorbed so many quirks that we think Shigaraki himself might have forgotten about some of them. He's also seen transferring countless quirks to fighters in the Underground Masquerade and to high-end Nomu. What quirks has All for One formerly possessed? Now that we've covered most of the quirks that Shigaraki is seen using, let us delve into the ones he possessed at some point in the past. These quirks were bestowed upon other individuals to further All for One's goals. Stockpiling power. This quirk allowed a user to stockpile power over time. He gave it to his brother Yoichi Shigaraki to win him over to his side, but instead, it combined with Yoichi's power transference quirk and created the All for One quirk, which would become the bane of his existence. Decay. This ability allows its user to destroy anything that they lay their hands on. It doesn't matter if it's organic or inorganic, once it comes into physical contact with the quirk user, it rapidly disintegrates. It was given to Tomura Shigaraki by All for One and is actually a reverse-engineered quirk of Kai Chisake's overhaul quirk. While Kai's quirk allows for similar disintegration, it also lets him put things back together as well. When it went through reverse engineering, the quirk was left with only its destructive side. Naval Laser. The current user of this quirk is Yuga Aoyama, and as the name suggests, he can shoot laser beams from his navel. He can determine the shape and size of the beam, but he's required to wear a device called the Sparkle Belt to properly utilize his abilities. Without the belt, the laser is impossible to control properly. The beam also has a recoil force strong enough to knock the user into the air at high speed. Yuga can also fire the naval laser from other parts of his body due to his costume's design, which is capable of channeling that energy. Additionally, the quirk seems to cause constant stomach issues for Aoyama. Overclock. This one grants the user the ability to move at super speed. This quirk increases the speed at which the user moves and gives them the ability to think, see, and hear at hyperspeed. The wielder of this quirk moves so fast that the world appears frozen to them. It was stolen from the vigilante Iwao Ogoro, also known as Knuckle Duster, and given to the villain number 6. Muscle augmentation. Thanks to this quirk, the user can augment, manipulate, and increase the layers of muscle both within and outside their body. Doing so grants them immense durability, strength, and speed. Wolfram, to who the quirk is bestowed upon by All for One, can overwhelm even All Might for a period of time. Despite its incredible raw power, its weakness lies in the fact that damaged muscle fibers tend to rip away easily. Anyone with a quirk capable of tearing through multiple fibers at once can quickly hinder the user of this quirk, leaving them open to damage. Airwalk. This quirk was acquired by All for One from an unknown person and given to Kaina Tsutsumi as payment for her targeting Izuku, the story's main hero. With this ability, she can walk quite literally in the air, although any lapse in concentration can result in her falling from the sky. She can make both vertical and lateral movements and uses this in conjunction with her rifle quirk to find better vantage points for her shooting. Scale Mail. This is a painful quirk that causes immense discomfort to its user in exchange for an increase in defensive prowess and durability. The scales that cover the user's body as armor protrude from their skin, causing them to bleed. This quirk is granted by All for One to the villain known as Spinner, along with other quirks to increase his threat. Although the armor is strong, it's not invincible and can be broken if hit with sufficient force. Body Bulk. This is yet another quirk that was bestowed by All for One to Spinner along with Scale Mail. As the name suggests, this quirk allows the user to gain a massive increase in body size, resulting in enhanced strength and power. What are All for One's ultimate moves? For a villain with a near endless list of superpowers, it's only natural that he also has more than one ultimate move. One of All for One's primary fighting techniques is how he uses multiple quirks at once to enhance and cover up their flaws in battle. This is essentially the case for his ultimate moves as well, though everything has been increased to an extreme level. These are the two ultimate moves of the most powerful quirk user in all of My Hero Academia and its primary antagonist, All for One. Ultimate Quirk Combination. With this move, All for One combines several quirks to transform his arm into a deadly weapon. The blow from this arm is meant to end any battle in a single hit, such is its power. To create this move, he combines spring-like limbs, multiplier, spear-like bones, hypertrophy, rivet, airwalk, 4 kinetic boosters, and 3 brawn boosters. All for One uses this move against All Might as his trump card during their battle in the Camino incident. Omnifactor Unleash. This move can be considered an ultimate move because when he uses it, All for One basically empties his entire arsenal at once. He combines all of the quirks he's ever stolen into a powerful move designed to obliterate anything standing in his path. He uses this move in the final battle to destroy everyone between him and Tomura Shigaraki to transfer his conscience into the young man. Does All for One have any weaknesses? Despite what All for One might have everyone believing, including himself, that he's a godlike being above everyone else, he does have his fair share of weaknesses, both mental and physical. Overconfidence. It takes quite a lot for his usual calm and cocky demeanor to be shaken due to the confidence he has in his superiority. When it does happen, it leads to him making a number of rash decisions. His faith in himself and his powers is so absolute that the very thought of someone being equal or greater to him is enough to affect his decision making. This is seen when he uses Omnifactor Unleash in a fit of rage to clear a path between himself and Tomura. It can also be seen when he decides to take the rewind drug and recklessly takes damage by over-relying on it. These factors ultimately lead to his demise. These actions are totally out of character for him, and he would never have been this desperate if he hadn't been so overconfident. Inability to discard quirks. This might seem like a strange weakness, but All for One cannot simply discard any quirks he doesn't like. He has to bestow them to someone. In his fight against Star and Stripe, America's #1 hero, she lays a trap within her powers. When her power gets absorbed by the villains, it starts killing the other quirks within him. He has to make a choice of either keeping this overwhelmingly powerful quirk, which he claims will make the war a mere formality, or risk losing every quirk he has within him. Any type of mental doubt that you can put a villain of All for One's caliber through is a valuable asset in a battle against him. Weakened physical condition. Even though All for One is able to take on multiple top heroes despite not being in top physical condition, this too can be seen as a weakness. This is because he's reliant on physical equipment to maintain his health. If somehow his life support system were to be damaged, he would be in dire straits. Not to mention, it's his physical condition that's one of the reasons behind him being forced to take the rewind drug in order to regain his former power. As mentioned earlier, this drug would result in his undoing. Suppressed humanity. Despite portraying himself as a megalomaniac villain with a god complex who despises anything that serves him no purpose, we get to see a semblance of humanity within All for One. When his physical body is destroyed, as well as Yoichi's final vestige, his vestige within Tomura states he feels hollow. In his last moments, he admits that he's a man who doesn't want to be forgotten and says negative things leave a lasting impression on the human psyche while trying to justify his actions. In the end, his mental state breaks down, leading him to lose the personality which made him reach the heights he did as the symbol of evil. He loses out to the very humanity he looked down upon in others and denied within himself until the very end. Marvelous verdict. act. All for One is a well-constructed villain who has no pretenses to his motivation and goals in front of the audience. We think he fulfilled the role of a villain who was evil for the sake of being evil very well. As such, there was no need to try and humanize him towards the end. He manages to achieve his goals by becoming the self-proclaimed symbol of evil, just like the villains in the comics he was inspired by. Even though he's presented as evil incarnate, he is not a one-dimensional character. He has shown a more human side to some of his subordinates, including Tomura. His humane nature was something that was left ambiguous until the very end, making the audience guess if it was really all just an act. Ultimately, his blatant disregard for the lives of his allies and enemies finally catches up with him. Despite his genius-level intellect, he wasn't able to find an alternative way to fill the hollow inside of him, instead giving in to his sadistic and misanthropic nature. We hope that with this video, we were able to give you a detailed look into the nature of All for One, the overpowered primary antagonist of My Hero Academia. This has been Wheezy249 for Marvelous Videos, and as always, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.